When doing your pelvic floor exercises, we need to take into consideration the structure of the pelvic floor. So I've just got my pelvic floor model here, so you can see deep inside and you can see superficially. The pelvic floor is not one muscle. The pelvic floor is a group of muscles, and they go from the bottom of the coccyx, that tailbone, all the way around the anus, around the vagina, around the urethra, towards the pubic bone. But they also go across from the seat bones and across and across and across here, and you can see that there's lots of muscles involved in that one group, and it needs to work functionally, all of those muscles together, to be able to support all of the organs above that are inside here, but also to be able to zip forward to create continence of the bowels and the bladder. Now, if you have just been doing pelvic floor exercises by thinking, oh, I just need to lift, and imagine I'm stopping myself weeing, hold it for a few seconds and let go, keep doing that, and you're not seeing improvement, it's probably because you're just exercising one or part of that muscle group. So it's really important that you get the muscles firing right from the back, through the middle and all the way to the front every time you do a pelvic floor contraction. You can't just be doing one part of that pelvic floor group, pelvic floor part of the pelvic floor group. So that's the first important thing. The second important thing is that the muscle, when you do a contraction, that you are actually contracting the muscle and it's lifting upwards, it's shortening and tightening. For some people, when they do a muscle contraction and they haven't quite got the strength, they actually put so much effort in that they tense the muscle, and that causes a bulging effect. Now, if I was to bring my tummy muscles in and I tighten gently, you can see that my fingers are coming closer together. So that's a gentle contraction that's tightening. Now, if I was to tense my tummy, it pushes it out. So I'm tensing and it pushes it out. And I feel like I might be tightening it, but actually what I'm doing is causing more damage. And if that's the pelvic floor that you're tensing and pushing, bearing down on, that can be causing prolapse and pelvic floor dysfunction, more so because you're not lifting. So it's important that it's a lifting feeling and not just a tensing. Other things that can contribute to that bulging down is if you're breath holding while you're doing your pelvic floor. So often when you're breath holding and tightening this tight part of the tummy muscle, which is compensation if your pelvic floor is weak, people often tighten here instead. You end up with a inward pressure here and a bearing down onto the pelvic floor, which means that actually you get often a bulging of the pelvic floor, or only part of the pelvic floor working. The back part tends to work more than the front if you're doing a lot of bracing here. So it's really important to be relaxed in your upper abdominals and keep breathing through the pelvic floor exercises as well. So I'm just going to show you them in lying position. Okay, so this is the easiest position to start them in because you've got no gravity, and then you can do them in sitting, and then you can progress to standing where you've got more gravity each time. So again, the position you're in will depend on how much the muscle group is easy to recruit. So if we're lying with our legs flat and you do a pelvic floor contraction, your chances are you'll just feel it in the anus. Bring your knees up to a nice neutral bent position, and you should be able to feel it pull all the way from the anus all the way to the front. If you bring your knees right up, you'll probably only feel it at the front. So this position is a good neutral position that you're able to zip all the way from the back to the front. It's also important to think about your pelvic position. So we don't want to be squashing the pelvis totally into the floor with no gap, and we don't want to be arching too much either. So we're finding that neutral position where you've got a little bit of a gap and it's flat on top. So if you could stand a drink on top of your bladder area, it's not going to spill too much because it's nice and flat. In that position, I want you to just imagine that you're zipping your pelvic floor from the anus as though you're stopping yourself passing wind, and then forward to the front as though you're stopping yourself weeing, and you can feel it coming all the way forward to the front. Some people like to imagine that they find it helpful to imagine that someone's got a pin that they're poking towards the vagina and you're trying to lift the vagina out of the way. Another way is by thinking that you're imagining you're going up in a lift. So if you go into an escalator and the door closes and you're starting at the bottom floor, which is the anus, and you're lifting and it's going up and up and up all the way to the top, which is the urethra, pushing against the pubic bone, and at that point you can't go any further. The lift stops, it clunks, the door opens, and you can let go. All right, so that's another way of thinking about it, coming all the way forward. It doesn't matter, don't think about time of holding it at the moment, just think about technique, how you're lifting it. Now, that's, if you can think of it doing that, so from the back all the way to the front with a neutral pelvis, And we're now going to bring in the breathing aspect, because chances are you're holding your tummy and bracing. So we want all of this area really relaxed. So I'm going to get you to breathe without doing any pelvic floor. And as you breathe in, I want you to think about relaxing your pelvic floor, just feeling about letting it go completely. So breathe in. And then as you breathe out, squeezing the pelvic floor in as though it's coming from the back all the way to the front. And then breathe in as you let go. You can breathe into your ribs, into your tummy, it's up to you. And then relaxing as the pelvic floor squeezes in and pulls all the way forward. And breathing in, letting go. And then as you breathe out, zipping all the way up to the front. And then breathing in, letting go. So that's quite a nice way of doing it. Don't worry if your pelvic floor let go after 1 second. It's just getting that technique, getting it all the way forward to the front. If you're thinking, well, I can't feel it coming forward to the front, just get stuck at the back, or it might be that you can't feel it at the back, you can only feel it at the front. There are some different ways of activating it. So a nice easy way to test that out is a sitting. So when you're in an upright neutral position, you should be, with your pelvis in a neutral position, you should be able to pull from the, activate the pelvic floor from the back passage all the way to the front. Okay, if you lean back in your chair and now squeeze your pelvic floor, you probably only feel the anus lifting. And then if you lean forward with your elbows on your knees and then lift the pelvic floor, you should feel the front lifting. Okay, so if you struggle with getting the front to activate, you can practice your exercises in this position to start with until you can get the front activating really nicely and you can feel it pulling forward from the back all the way to the front, and then you should be able to start doing them in the upright position and feeling it come all the way from the back to the front. But if you're always doing the pelvic floor exercise in a slump position when you're breastfeeding or when you're watching telly, the chances are you're just going to be activating the back passage and not actually pulling it all the way forward. So do think about your positioning, think about it lifting, think about your breathing and making sure you're relaxing everything else here, your abdominals.